Welcome to Miles Ahead, the Canadian Points podcast brought to you by frugalflyer.ca, where we talk about all things miles and points, a hobby that allows us to travel all over the world in style and on a budget. Today, in Learning to Get Miles Ahead, we'll be giving you a step-by-step guide on how you can go from zero to hero, redeeming rewards for a heavily discounted vacation. That will be alongside our usual segments, Guess That Card, Promo or No-Mo, and Question of the Month. Before we get too far into this episode, I want to remind listeners that you can always find our timestamps in the show notes if you want to jump around to different sections or come back and listen to something again. Additionally, if you're enjoying what you hear, please leave us a review and rating on your favorite podcast platform. We read all of the feedback, and reviews in particular help us tremendously. With that out of the way, let me introduce today's guests. I'm joined by co-founder Josh, longtime Canadian Points and Miles writer Kirin, and we're welcoming back Jeff to the show after being away for a few episodes.
Yeah, good to be back with you guys once again, and we got a good topic, so I'm sure we'll have some good discussion.
We're happy to have you here, Jeff. Now, is everyone ready to put their rewards credit card knowledge to the test?
Always.
It's the Staples Flexity card.
Staples Flexity. That is an excellent guess. Not what we're looking for, but I won't dock you for it yet. All right, everyone. Jumping into our first official segment of 2025. Continuing our traditional episode format from last episode, we did our year in review episode. We're moving now on to Guess That Card. Listeners should be familiar with this segment by now, but if you're new here, I've pre-selected a rewards credit card, and I'll provide hints to help everybody get on the right track to identify it correctly. Jeff, Kirin, and Josh, today's guests, will use those hints to guess Family Feud style as quickly as possible until the card is identified. Each guest will get one attempt to guess the correct card before another hint is revealed, so use those guesses wisely. The guest with the correct answer will join me for a short chat about that card, its main benefits, and why the Frugal Flyer team might recommend it. All right. So, our first hint for Guess That Card. This is a Canadian card. Simply by spending enough on this card, you can earn an upgrade to your elite status. And this card also has a spending category bonus that awards 3 points per dollar. I made this one a little tougher. Anybody care to venture a guess?
I'm going to have to go with the Steinbeck Credit Union cash bonus dollars MasterCard.
That's a great guess, but unfortunately incorrect, Kirin. Josh, Jeff, what do you got for me? Just throw something out there. Anything. I've got more hints for you.
Neo Cathay Pacific.
It's the Aeroplan. It's the Amex Aeroplan Reserve card.
It's not the Amex Aeroplan Reserve card. And as a reminder for the rules, we've got to wait until the second hint is revealed after your first guess comes out. Josh, you're our last contestant that hasn't ventured a guess yet.
It's not Cathay.
Do you need me to repeat the hints?
So it's not Cathay, correct?
It's not the Cathay Pacific Neo Financial World Elite
Is this 20
MasterCard.
questions? I didn't realize.
It's only 3 questions. I've only put 3 hints out there, and somehow we've had a whole conversation.
He's interrogating you back with questions.
You got to get the information you can, however, right?
That's true.
I honestly have no clue, and I feel like I'm throwing my knowledge into disarray right now. I'm just going to go with something super simple. No, it wouldn't be Aeroplan, because you can't get everyday TD Aeroplan Visa Infinite. I don't think that's right.
Nope, that is incorrect. All right, moving on to round number 2 of hints. I'll remind you of the round 1 hints. It's a Canadian card. Simply by spending enough on this card, you can earn an upgrade to your elite status. It has a category spending bonus that awards 3 points per dollar. And the new hint is that its main design color is gray.
Oh, can I guess? Am I allowed to guess?
Yep.
Okay, Air France.
Absolutely.
The Brim.
Nope. It's not the Brim World Elite.
That's like
flying
2X. Is that not gray?
It maxes out at 2x, but it maxes at 2x.
That's right. Yeah, Kirin's on the right track. So think about 3x reward spending cards. And I'll be perfectly honest here. This is probably not a card you're going to be spending a lot of money on. I intentionally made this a difficult, brain-racking exercise here in episode 10.
Okay, I'm going to use
Miles Ahead.
I'm going to have a non-meme answer.
Okay.
And here's the thing. I don't know if it's... I think it's primarily colors black, but I guess if you hold it in the light, it could be gray.
I know what it is now.
Is this the RBC
No, it's not issued by RBC.
Damn it, that was my next guess.
Well, I'm going to get the answer out whether you interrupt me or not. And it was Avios Visa Infinite, which is not the correct answer, but I said it.
You did. All right, Jeff, throw something at the wall so I can give the last hint here, which I think is going to give it away.
I can't even think of any other programs.
All right,
besides the
my
ones we've already mentioned.
Okay, my final hint is that this card features a small amount of orange on the design as well. Have I stumped the Frugal Flyer team? Oh my goodness, I've cut too deep.
Honestly, when you said Simply in the first part, all I can think of is Simply Financial, and that is not even anywhere near where I'm at.
So the word simply is not the important part there.
Yeah.
So you can increase your elite status simply by spending on the card. I don't think any of us would recommend to do that, but you could. The orange is a key indicator here. I'll leave it with that. And if everybody ventures one more guess and there's still nothing, I'll reveal the identity of the card. Orange. What loyalty programs have orange in them? All right, no guesses.
I have no idea.
Gentlemen.
Because like in the States, the color of orange is
not
from
States. No.
But no. But
Nope.
like, so,
It's a Canadian issued card. That was the very first thing.
And no, but here's the thing. Some Canadian issued cards have esoteric properties, such as the fact that RBC Avion can be transferred to American Airways. That's an esoteric property, but it is true.
All
so
right.
I'm just thinking. There is precedent for Canadian credit cards having reciprocal American benefits.
What's the issuer?
The issuer is American Express. It's gray in color and features a small amount of orange and has a spending category of 3x.
Yeah, now I'm just running through every single Amex card in my head.
I'm really surprised that you guys haven't gotten this by now.
Canada.
It's a Canadian card. All right.
And it's not
drawn
closed.
this segment up.
It's 1 second. It's not closed to it's open to new applications as well.
You can apply for this right now on frugalflyer.ca. You won't get any Frugal Flyer cash, but you can apply for it. Gentlemen, the card that I have selected is the American Express Marriott Bonvoy Business Card.
It does have
earns
orange on it.
3 points per dollar. It earns 3 points per dollar for every dollar you spend on gas, dining, and travel. And here's the thing that I knew would throw everybody on the wrong loop. Cardholders are eligible to be upgraded to Gold Elite status when they charge $30,000 in purchases within a calendar year. So that fulfills all of their requirements. It's a Canadian card. Simply spend enough, you can upgrade your elite status from silver to gold. You earn 3 points per dollar on gas and other purchases. Its main color design is gray, and it also features a small amount of orange.
Okay, I would like to 1 second here. I would like to plead I have the old design of the card defense.
That's fair.
Because I do have both of these cards and I would have known it. However, I don't have the new design currently possessing orange because I am such a Giga Chad original gangster that I still possess the old versions. And I know that nobody can see this because I'm on the show, but on the video call on which we make the show, I am now holding up my 2 certified Hood Classic cards that are 100% gray to prove that this was a stump type question. But excellently played.
There's a small amount of orange underneath the O in Bonvoy.
Yeah, there is.
Darn. That's hardcore. Well played, sir. Well played.
That was a good one. You know,
I figured that we don't talk about those cards a lot, but we will be talking about them. So since nobody guessed this correctly, we can all have a chat about the card and its benefits. Obviously, the biggest thing that comes with the Marriott Bonvoy cards in Canada is the free night certificate. I personally just used my free night certificate from this card to save about $300 Canadian. It's kind of funny. The hotel that I booked was only 20,000 points, but the cash price in the mountains in upstate New York was super inflated. So it was like $400 US, or excuse me, $400 Canadian. And I paid about $150 for that free night certificate. So you can find value everywhere, but that is obviously the biggest benefit. I don't know. Would anybody recommend spending $30,000 on a Marriott Bonvoy business credit card to earn Gold Elite status?
No. And if you want to know everything about Gold Elite status, we do have an article that we'll include in the show notes. And the Cole's note, it's really not worth it. Shoot for at least platinum status with Marriott Bonvoy.
Excellent point, Josh. Anybody have anything else to add about this wonderful card that we don't spend on but pay the annual fee every year?
To my eyes, this is not an exact shade of orange. It's more of a very pale pink. I would just like to reiterate that for everybody paying attention.
Yes, because the Marriott Bonvoy colors are pink everywhere on their website. I'd encourage listeners right now to go to MarriottBonvoy.com and see all of the pink highlights on their webpage.
Hey, whoa, some of us have different colored heterochromat, whatever. I'm not an ophthalmologist. Get a nerd to do that.
All right, so after a very eventful Guess That Card segment, we are now moving on to Keeping You Miles Ahead, which is a broad overview of miles and points news. The first piece of news here, we probably should have talked about this in our last episode, but we forgot, or actually, excuse me, we didn't forget. We had two main events in our last episode. So the first piece of news, of course, is that Air Canada has made beer and wine complimentary in economy class for US and Canada flights. Now, this specifically doesn't include Mexico. In the Mexico portion of this, I was actually going on vacation in October down to Cancun at the Hilton Tulum All-Inclusive. And the crew on that flight, or I shouldn't say the crew because they're literally as airline crew, the passengers on that flight were very interested in this promotion. And that's when I discovered that it didn't include Mexico. So if you're heading down to Mexico, just know that you won't get free beer and wine. And then we also have another piece of Air Canada news. Would anybody like to share that?
Yeah, so we saw a change in early January, I believe, for any basic economy fares booked after January 3rd. They no longer include a piece of carry-on luggage, only a personal item, which is quite the change and not a very positive shift for those passengers who prefer the more no-frills fares that are offered out there.
No, it's really bad. And I mentioned this a little bit because Andy brought it up on our last episode that it's really terrible to see mainline carriers going down the way of low-cost carriers. I think that if you have a credit card with Air Canada, like a co-branded Aeroplan credit card, you still will get the carry-on. But truthfully, I haven't researched enough to know which credit card it is. Does anybody else know if it's a core credit card or a premium card and you still get that carry-on?
Yeah, I actually just looked this up earlier. So I don't have any of the Canadian core cards, but I have the Chase Aeroplan MasterCard, which I believe is classified as a core card.
Yes, it's kind of in its own tier, but yeah, it's in the same level.
Right, so it does include check bags for up to 8 passengers on the same itinerary. So I'm going to assume that that's probably still the case for the Canadian core cards as well.
Yeah, so for sure,
we're talking about
the
check or
bags,
carry-on.
That's what I was just about to bring up. Good point, Kirin. Check bags, absolutely. That's always included. But it's this new carry-on rule where if you book basic economy, you only get a personal item. You'd have to pay for a carry-on bag. And I think that there's a rule with a credit card, but I haven't spent enough time looking it up.
I haven't seen anything yet, but I'll keep an eye out.
So I'm not here to defend Air Canada. I would like to point out, though, that air travel is at all-time highs. People demand super low-priced tickets. And the Google algorithm artificially rewards people who push the price low to being higher on the algorithm. So is this a somewhat shady maneuver? I would say so, because a lot of people do not read the contract of carriage before they book. However, they are basically getting what was previously the price of, say, a Flair flight or some other type of ultra low-cost carrier flight on a mainline carrier, benefiting from the mainline carrier's amenities, service schedule, and maintenance infrastructure and piloting crew, but they have to pay for that. Now, is the marginal cost up to the next tier commensurate with what they're likely to be charging you for just your carry-on? Probably not. So in that sense, you still have to pay that extra bit. But this is just sort of an interesting microcosm, I think, of the Canadian aviation space, because I know I've written about it and we've observed it, but Canada has seen so many ultra low-cost carriers that just really couldn't make that business model of, give them the razors but sell them the blades model work. And so now we have a hybrid model where the big air carriers have that for the absolute cheapest of fares. They have a higher price for the next fares up. And then, as with most carriers, they're still making the vast majority of their real revenue and profits off of the front of the airplane.
Yeah.
And the premium cabins.
Yeah, I think it's tough when consumers are so price sensitive. That's the reality, right? So I get it. Mm-hmm. I agree. I would much rather fly, if you gave me the option of a low-cost carrier or Air Canada Basic Economy, I'm picking Air Canada Basic Economy every time because I'm pretty damn sure it's going to get there and get off the ground. But it's tough. Costs go up, benefits get worse. I don't know if I call it in-shitification, but it does suck. I get it. So, but I think it is, I get it from both sides, frankly, right?
Yeah. Something to be aware of. And if there's any listener out there that has booked a basic economy ticket and has a core or premium credit card and can experience this firsthand, please write into us, leave us a piece of feedback, and we would love to know that so we can share it on the next episode. Now, Jeff, somebody else has something to add?
I was just going to interrupt you. I did just look it up, and if you have a core credit card or premium, you still get one complimentary carry-on bag.
Okay.
There we go.
So core or premium. Don't write into us. Please do not leave us feedback. We have the answer. Now, Jeff, Marriott Bonvoy made some news with their nightly upgrade awards, but didn't tell anybody and just added it in the terms and conditions. What's going on here?
Yeah, so they've made a very small change. I don't really think this is going to be anything significant. They've just expanded the clearance window of nightly upgrade awards to 5 days prior to check-in, as opposed to what it was previously at 3 days. This is, like I said, this is like a really minor change and almost nothing. Really, 2 days is, I can't really see it having that much impact on how these awards get approved. So worth knowing, but not really something to get all that excited about.
The real question is, will your upgrade even clear at the end of the day, right? Whether it's 5 days, 3 days, I have a decent track record, but I definitely don't hold my breath. And I still go with the attitude of asking for the upgrade you want, to say the least.
Yes. I think my favorite part about this change is that the clearance window didn't change for the high-end brands where it really matters. Like the Edition, the Ritz-Carlton, and St. Regis were not included in the change. And it's just such a Bonvoy thing for them to exclude their high-end properties. Like it really costs them that much more money and that much more revenue to open it at the same time for the high-end properties as the mid and lower tier ones. So Marriott Bonvoy just being Marriott Bonvoy. And then Kirin, you've dipped your toes into the Alaska Airlines mileage plan before. They made some news, and to me, honestly, one of the biggest pieces of news that we have to discuss today about status qualifying miles. What happened here?
Yeah, so you can actually get status qualifying miles on award flights, which is, now you can correct me if I'm wrong, Danny, but I believe that that's a unique feature, or I haven't heard of this happening on almost any other program. And it also
Delta will. Yeah. So when you redeem Delta Sky Miles, they give you a portion back in MQDs, but it's so small, it really doesn't matter. You would never achieve elite status.
Well, and that's what's really interesting here. It's because basically there's a twofold thing that's fascinating about this. Firstly, it's that in the Alaska program, 1 mile flown is one status qualifying mile.
Mm-hmm.
But on top of that, Alaska is still one of the last of the dinosaurs. It's a fixed mileage. It's a fixed cost mileage award chart. So
yeah, we talked about this in a lounge episode. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So it's basically, if you use it, for example, I'm going to be flying back from Europe to North America next year. That was 55,000 Alaska miles for a one-way award flight in business on the partner airline Condor. So that would make this very unique.
Yeah, and you're going to earn about 4,000 status qualifying miles. So you actually only need 15,000 SQMs. I don't know if that's actually what they call it, but that's what Air Canada calls it and what our listeners are going to be most familiar with it for. You only need 15,000 more status qualifying miles to achieve One World Ruby and Alaska 20K. So pretty cool feature of the program. Is anybody else planning on sort of chasing, for lack of a better term, Alaska status with this?
Probably not chasing, but I think it's really cool, and it might result in me flipping more American Express US membership rewards points through Hawaiian and onto Alaska. Because like Kirin said too, the award charts are stellar. Nobody can deny that, right? If you can find the space, it's really good. Taxes are pretty good on it, so could be a cool opportunity.
Yep. Is anybody going to send more of their American Express United States membership rewards points to Hawaiian and then use the temporary feature, as Jeff so eloquently put it, to transfer them at 1-to-1 from Hawaiian to Alaska? I'm considering putting a few more of mine over there because of this feature. Not just because that's an awesome transfer and it's great to have Alaska in, but because of this, I'm more inclined now to use Alaska Mileage Plan.
Yeah, I was able to earn a decent amount of Alaska miles just from the MBNA one-time transfer, so I'm not really looking to do that, but
Gotcha. So because that opportunity is now dead, if you hadn't done that MBNA transfer, what are your thoughts on it, Jeff?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I'm actually kind of surprised that this temporary feature of the MXMR to Hawaiian to Alaska has actually stuck around this long. I totally wouldn't have thought that it's been a couple months now.
Yeah.
I want to say, what was it? The November 15th or the October 15th newsletter that it officially became out. Something
late
like that.
October,
so it's
early
been
November.
At least 2.5 months. Yeah. It's been 2 full months of this ability. Yeah. And then the last thing I have to add to that is that for Canadians that don't have American credit cards yet, and you don't plan on getting them soon, I've talked quite a lot about my love of Porter Airlines. Porter partners with Alaska Airlines, and a lot of their fares, like even the economy standard, which doesn't include a check bag, but just includes a carry-on, will earn 100% of miles flown. So I actually just earned about 2,700 Alaska miles from my flights back to Winnipeg for Christmas from New York City. So that's not going to be a huge sum, but I would at least argue that if you're going to be flying on Porter, the Porter award system is not bad. I actually wrote our guide on that, but the Alaska system is so much better that I would much rather be earning Alaska if I was starting from zero with Porter than if I was already in the Porter ecosystem, blah, blah, blah. But starting from zero, earn Alaska, don't earn Porter. And that's my last 2 cents on that. Excellent. So that's all we have today for Keeping You Miles Ahead, a broad overview of Miles and Points news. We're now moving on to Promo or NOMO, which is a recent review of loyalty promotions, if they're worth pursuing, or if you should pay no more attention to them. Kirin, what have we got in a recent Miles and Points promotion that you might want to pay attention to?
So I know what we have, and I know what we have sadly lacked. So the great thing is that Hilton has put on its double points promotion for all Hilton Honors members who stay at a Hilton from, a couple days ago, New Year's Day, through to April 30th. You do need to register either online or on the app, and we are going to include a link in the show notes for everybody who hasn't done that yet. But the real thing that has been the tragedy so far has been the thing that has been missing, which comes out every first quarter, which is the Marriott Bonvoy with its soft pastel pink promotional colors to have double promotional nights per night spent on eligible cash rates until April the 30th. Now, sometimes it comes out a bit later in January, but it's been noticeably absent so far.
I think we're all crossing our fingers on that one. We'll definitely include it in the newsletter should that promotion come out, but that's, I think many of us on this episode, it's one of our favorite opportunities to mattress run Marriott Bonvoy. Yeah. If you're looking for platinum or titanium status, Kirin knows better than anyone. We have some incredibly cheap hotels in Edmonton that you can pair with promotions to pay. I think we got it down to maybe $8 or $9 per EQN last year, effectively.
Yeah, for each elite qualifying night. Yeah.
And that's before the free breakfast.
Yeah. And then, I don't know how to place the value on a free breakfast at a 4 points. I mean, depending on where you're at, but there's got to be some intrinsic value there as well. So it could get even better.
Of all the breakfasts I've ever eaten at hotels, those were one of them.
Now, speaking of mattress runs, with this Hilton double points promo, is it mattress run worthy? Should you stay at a Hilton just to earn Hilton points? Because it's double points. It sounds like a lot.
I mean, Hilton points at the best of times, they're not worth the most. That's kind of the reality. Typically, we benchmark it against about 0.5 cents per point USD, as you can typically buy them around there. Would I go out of my way to stay at a Hilton for this promo? No. If I wasn't looking to earn, elite nights in another program, or maybe I'm already, lifetime platinum with Marriott Bonvoy, and I wanted some Hilton points and it's all is the same with the same cost, I'd consider it. Depends on the quality of property, but I'm not gonna, it would be an actual stay, not a mattress run, to say the least.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that this is a good promotion because you basically end up with a base earn rate of 10% back on all of your Hilton stays. If you're not any promotional, or if you're not any status member or anything like that, it's worth registering and just getting it out of the way in case you end up staying at one and forget about it. But you should pay a little attention to this one.
Yep.
Maybe not a lot of attention, but a little bit.
As always, too, right? If you're into the US credit cards and you have the Hilton Aspire, that's got 14 times on it as well. If you're staying somewhere, always charge everything to the room. get it billed out at the end, and you can get a ton of points back depending on the property.
Yes.
So,
yeah. And just to clarify the promo for anybody thinking, wow, 28 times on my spending sounds wonderful. You do not get double bonus points on everything. You're only going to get double base points. So essentially, you're not going to get 200% on your stay plus your double credit card spending. You'll just get 20 points per dollar at Hilton rather than 10 points per dollar as the base amount.
Because if you did, we'd be finding the best one in rural Iowa that has an amenable manager.
Absolutely. All right, that's all we have for promo or no-mo, where you need to pay a little bit of attention to the Hilton double points promotion. We're now on to our main topic on our main segment, learning to get miles ahead, how to go from 0 to point hero. So this is going to be quite a lengthy discussion, as we've got 6 steps to teach anybody, an average Joe or an average Joette, how to go from 0 knowledge about points to an absolute hero about redeeming. And the first step that we have is understanding the 2 types of points. So I'll have Josh talk about what I mean when we're talking about 2 different types of points that exist.
So starting out, we have what would be called fixed value points. So these points are typically pegged to a specific value, and they're worth, 1 cent per point. So for example, a very popular program within Canada is Scene Plus Rewards. If you go shopping at Safeway, Sobeys, you see the banner everywhere. It's a great program. But no matter how many Scene rewards you earn, they're always going to be worth at most and at least 1 cent per point. So you could have, 250,000 Scene Plus points, which is a good amount, don't get me wrong, but that's only worth $2,500. Only $2,500. There's a few programs that work like that. Similarly, a lot of the bank loyalty programs work like that. On that flip side, we have what are called flexible points or flexible value points. And so there's still an inherent value pegged to them for what it's worth, but that value can multiply greatly when they're used properly. And so what we see with these is often transferable currencies. So a big one in Canada is American Express membership rewards points. The reason why they have these flexible value point, because you can redeem them with American Express for like a statement credit or whatever, and that's great. Not really, but it is an option. Or you can transfer them to some of the most popular programs that Canadians have access to. So, Air Canada Aeroplan, Marriott Bonvoy, British Airways, Avios, things like that, where, that point that you may have redeemed for a statement credit at, 0.8 cents is now worth, 3 cents redeeming on a flight, right? So it adds that flexibility there, adds some additional value, and that's where the greatest value in miles and points tends to lie.
Yes. So those flexible points or the flexible value points are really where we start to see the outsized value. That's the reason why we're all here. It's why we play the credit card game. And just to give an example, someone who's collected 250,000 Scene Plus points, they're going to be worth $2,500 in value. But if you're spending on a Scotiabank Passport Visa Infinite card, that earns 1 point per dollar everywhere. You could, if you're a high spender, spend $250,000 on an Aeroplan Visa Infinite from TD or CIBC and have 250,000 Aeroplan points. Rather than be worth $2,500 of value, you can get 4 one-way flights in business class between Europe and the East Coast. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit later, is how exactly to find those rewards. Now, what are the 2 transferable points in Canada, Kirin? When we talk about the 2 banks that exist, what are they and where can you transfer the points to?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So we have basically 2 of these currencies that operate. So I think lesser noticed one, but by no means a lesser currency, by no means a bad currency, is one that I alluded to earlier, which is RBC Avion. And the reason that this one is quite powerful is because this is something that a lot of people, including many loved ones, many of your own loved ones, or you yourself at home, may have sitting if you've been a long-time RBC customer. And as one of the largest consumer banks in Canada, it's one that people have a lot of access to. You can earn it via the RBC Avion Infinite products, such as the RBC Avion Visa Infinite or the RBC Avion Visa Platinum, or if you own a business through the RBC Business, I think
it's the RBC Avion business visa.
card. It's I'm just saying so many variations of RBC and Avion and Visa that it's all getting tongue twisted in my mouth. Which
Absolutely.
Is funny.
Well, Kirin, that's why I specifically passed it off to somebody else, so they would have to go through all of that, and I wouldn't get tongue twisted.
and don't worry, But before we get to that, I just want to talk about. So you can transfer these points to British Airways Avios, which is one letter off, but not to be confused with Avion. That often has bonuses. Yep. Then you also have Cathay Pacific Asia Miles, very valuable. You don't get it at a rate of 1-to-1. You usually get it at a rate of 1 to 0.75.
But actually, for RBC, it is a 1-to-1 transfer.
Okay, so it's 1-to-1. Okay, so is it 1 to 0.75 for American Airways?
That's right. Yes. American Airlines has a 1 to 0.7 transfer ratio. It's actually the worst transfer ratio of most airline currencies from bank points in Canada.
With that being said, there are sometimes promotions to take that up to closer to 1-to-1. And on top of that, those points are very hard to get for anybody of any description anywhere.
Yes.
So, and they pack a big punch. They tend to have quite a low number of points needed for quite a nice redemptions. That's why they can be very valuable to people.
Absolutely.
And of course, you can always transfer these at 1 cent per point to WestJet dollars, which of course can only be used on fares and not on the seemingly endless bevy of taxes and fees that airline will charge customers.
Yes, and if you'd like to know more about that, you can read Kirin's excellent article, What the Tax?, which he so eloquently put together and broke down exactly what WestJet charges for taxes and fees. Now, Jeff, I'd like you to jump in here for the first time on our Learning to Get Miles Ahead segment and tell us all about American Express membership rewards. I know that Josh referred to a few of their transfer partners, but we've got a few more to talk about here.
Yeah, so I think most of us would agree that Amex membership rewards are the king currency in Canada for sure. Not only do they have the most transfer partners, but they're generally a fairly easy points currency to earn just because there's so many Amex membership rewards earning cards in Canada. So you have the big one for us, which is Aeroplan, British Airways as well. And then some I would call second tier transfer partners that have their uses, but maybe only in a more limited nature. You got Delta, which I honestly, it's not a program I've ever really looked that closely at. It just doesn't seem to have the value that you can get from many of the other programs. And then you have Cathay Pacific again as well, which can be a really good transfer partner. And then
one of the big differences, sorry to butt in there, Jeff, is that when you're transferring American Express membership rewards, you get a 1 to 0.75 transfer ratio.
Right.
When you're sending them to Asia Miles. With RBC, it's 1-to-1. So we'll talk more about where to look for awards, but that is a huge difference between those two programs. Please carry on. Air France KLM. I love this one.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Air France KLM also has that same 0.75 transfer ratio.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
So those two are probably ones that are not going to be as attractive. And then, of course, you have the two hotel programs, Marriott Bonvoy and Hilton Honors. They're good in a pinch, but probably not the best use of your points.
For Bonvoy, it's 1 to 1.2, which is actually highest. That is the highest regular transfer ratio for Bonvoy in any country.
Yep.
And then it is actually 1-to-1 on Hilton Honors, which is an awful value because those are only worth about half a cent American. And as much as the Canadian dollar has taken it rather roughly in the past couple weeks, it has not devalued to that point yet. So just wanted to point that out quickly.
Yep. And Jeff, finished it off with Etihad. Why should we transfer all of our American Express membership rewards to Etihad, said with the most sarcasm possible?
So Etihad is honestly a program that I've never really looked that closely at. My understanding is that the cancellation policy on Etihad award redemptions is really poor. Maybe you can get into the details on what those cancellation policies are, because I'm not aware of them. But honestly, most Canadians are going to find the most use out of these points by transferring to Aeroplan, British Airways, and maybe a couple others in some select circumstances.
So just so we can talk about Etihad and why you should never transfer your points there, if you cancel your award within 20 days of departure, you're going to lose 25% of your award points. If you cancel between 10 days and 7 days, you lose 50% of your award points. And if you cancel 7 days until departure, the award is just gone. all of your points are gone into the ether and they don't exist anymore. So Etihad doesn't have that many good redemptions anyway, but they're not even something to consider. The last thing to talk about with American Express rewards on a high level is that if your habits change and you want to focus on cash back, they can be redeemed at 1 cent per point. So, well, that's definitely lower value compared to transferring to the airlines and hotel programs. If you decide that you need some cash back at a certain point in your life, you can redeem them at 1 cent per point, which is excellent. So the Cobalt card in particular, we talk about it a lot, earning 5 points per dollar on eats and drinks. It's basically like 5% cash back up to $2,500 a month and spend if you want to use your points that way. Now, Kirin, which one is best? How do we decide what points I need?
I mean, that's a great question, but really what it comes down to is that's something that travelers can only answer for themselves. And it's going to depend on where they want to go, when they want to go, what their availability to book it is. And just the recommendation I would make would be try not to transfer out your transferable currencies until you're ready to make the booking. Is what I call the just-in-time principle, which just means that, you know, folks can get a little bit excited. They're really into the game. You really think that points are super cool. You know about Air Canada Aeroplan. It's super convenient. It's something that's very familiar to you. You've been flying Air Canada all your life. You stick all your points there. You go to book, say, your trip to Seoul with your mom. This happened to a friend of mine. And boom, dynamic pricing, super, super expensive to get there. East Asia as a whole is difficult to get to, but I don't think that my good buddy doing this really got the value out of his miles that he would have liked. And if we had just followed the just-in-time principle, maybe those points could have been more usefully apportioned, for example, on partner availability to go to Europe one summer or to go somewhere else on a more economic basis, rather than having to, you know, have them be locked there. Then you're trying to look for redemptions that you may not want. You might forego other bookings that you did want more. So I would just say transfer in time, just in time.
Yep. I think that's a very crappy lesson to learn firsthand. I have a chunk of Virgin Atlantic points that are still sitting in an account. Very little, but enough that I shouldn't have speculatively transferred many, many years ago. So don't make that mistake.
Yes, and we'll get into transfers and transfer bonuses and all that a little bit later, but that's basically what you need to know about what types of points exist in Canada. So just to wrap up this section before we move on to step 2 of becoming a points hero, you want to make sure you're collecting transferable or flexible value points, as these will give you a chance to get outsized value, whereas things like Scene Plus and TD rewards and Aventura points will not allow you to transfer to partners, and they're going to be fixed at either half a cent, 1 cent, or occasionally with a promotion, a little bit more than that. So once you have the right points, or once you know what points you want to collect, your second step to becoming a points hero is optimizing the cards you have with product switching. And if you don't know what a product switch is because you're a regular consumer that doesn't do credit card rewards for a living, you're in the vast majority. All the banks, or I shouldn't say all the banks, most of the banks allow product switching. But what is that? Jeff, can you tell me what a product switch is, and for anybody listening?
Oh, yeah, it's really simple. If you, say, hold a CIBC Aeroplan card and you, or actually I'll use TD for as a better example. If you say hold a TD Aeroplan Visa card and you are no longer happy with it, you can just call up the bank and say that you'd like to switch to a different credit card, and they will do that for you. But as you said, not all of them do this, but I would say most of them will in some form or another. Some will restrict you to the same network. For example, if it's a Visa, they'll want you to switch to another Visa. Or some will restrict you based on the loyalty program. For example, they may only allow you to switch from one type of Aeroplan card to another, and so on. But that's kind of the basics of product switching. Do you guys have anything to add? Yep. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that sums it up extremely well. Josh, you have anything there? Are you good?
So the reason why we look to do product switching is you can actually earn a welcome bonus, whether it's the full welcome bonus or a subset of the welcome bonus, or simply just start earning the currency that you're interested in by switching to the right card.
Yes. Yeah. So this is what we call low-hanging fruit in our hobby of collecting miles and points. And you might not even need to apply for cards. And actually, not to put any spoilers out there, but we're on step 2 right now. And the 5th step of becoming a points hero is applying for new credit cards. And that was done intentionally because you probably have some opportunity to earn some extra points that you didn't even know existed. So we're going to talk about all 5 big banks in Canada, their product switching policies. And then, of course, we have the small cousin that's still a large bank for points and miles people, but American Express, the unofficial 6th big bank in Canada, and what they do for product switching as well. So I'm going to tee us off here with Toronto Dominion, or TD Bank. I personally only banked with TD before I got into miles and points, and that served me very well because if anybody didn't bank with TD before they started adding more cards to their portfolio, they are extremely difficult to get new credit with, as Josh can attest to. But luckily, I've done lots of TD product switching. And with that, I've also got some experience to share. So with TD, you've got essentially 3 families of cards. You've got the Aeroplan cards, you've got the cashback cards, and then you've also got the first class travel or the travel cards in general, what earn TD rewards points. That is the bank's fixed value currency, where you can redeem them for a whole host of things, but the best way to redeem them is with Expedia for TD. The best way to ensure that you get a welcome bonus in full is by changing from one family to the next. It used to be a lot more lucrative where you could change once a year and you would get a full welcome bonus. That doesn't really happen anymore. They've really tightened up their regulations. And then especially with the Aeroplan cards, we're going to get into that a little bit later, but they're very strict on their welcome bonus regulations now. So you can't just constantly switch your card. But if you have a fixed value card and you change to an Aeroplan card, generally you should get the bonus. And with this TD product switching, it's super easy. All you have to do is call them. If you call them through the app, you actually get put on a priority line, which is quite nice. The reps usually know what they're talking about. You'll have to go through a few disclosures that they'll read to you over the phone, and you request which card do you want to switch to. If you have more than one card, you obviously have to specify which card you want to switch, give them the last 4 digits, and they'll let you know that you're eligible or not eligible. Oftentimes, the reps will say stuff that they don't really know. So if somebody says you're not going to get the bonus, you might not. Ultimately, if you have to pay a $120 annual fee, it's not the end of the world. It's kind of the cost of doing business. But TD product switching, super easy to do. Call them on the phone. They'll process the product switch, and 7 to 10 days, you're going to get your card. Moving on to the next big bank, we're going to have Kirin talk about CIBC. Kirin, what do you have to share for us there?
Yeah, so CIBC is not dissimilar to TD Bank in the sense that you'll have to call in. And when you call in, you'll have to ask them to switch a card. And you can say, I have this card and I would like this other one. And they do allow changing between different families of cards. So, for example, if you have an Aventura Visa Infinite and you want the gold version for whatever reason, then you can downgrade to that. But that does have an annual fee. If you wanted to go to a no-fee card that has no rewards, then they can sort you out for that as well. And there are a variety of options to do that. Now, CIBC is unique because it does have specific targeted upgrade offers. So, for example, if you hold the Aventura Visa Infinite card and you want to go to the Visa Infinite Privilege, there are routinely offers for this that might exceed even the public offer. So, for example, I've seen spend $3,000 to get 80,000 Aventura points. So that was more during the heyday of the pandemic, but that was certainly something that was doable back in the day. And the nice promotional bonuses tend to be up and down within the same family. With that being said, they can also tell you sometimes that you either aren't eligible for the bonus or they are also able to decline you for changing if they feel that you're changing it too often. Also, just be advised that there's going to be a very lengthy disclosure that they're going to read you out from a pre-recorded message every time. So that's just their process for doing it, and it does work.
Yeah, very similar to TD in that respect that you have to call in. I can actually vouch my P4, I guess I would call her, my mother, was recently targeted for a upgrade offer from her Aeroplan, from her CIBC Aeroplan Visa Infinite to an Infinite Privilege. And I think it was something like 80,000 points, and you got 20,000 on first purchase and then 60,000 after spending 4,000 in the first 3 months. So it was a fantastic offer. So make sure you're signed up for CIBC promotional emails, and that way you'll be able to opt in to those offers. Now, Josh, you are the resident RBC expert. You may or may not have multiple RBC credit cards open at one time. What can you tell us about product switching with that big bank?
Product switching with RBC is probably the easiest of the three we've talked about so far. You're able to just do it completely self-serve online. So once you log into your RBC banking account, on the right, you click on the card that you want to switch. And on the right-hand side, you'll see switch your credit card. Go through a series of prompts where you're selecting the new card, entering some information, and submit it. And you'll receive the new card typically 7 to 10 business days. RBC, if you're going from family to family, or if you haven't gotten a bonus on that trade line yet, you're probably going to get some sort of bonus. It won't be the public offer, but it's pretty consistent. We do have articles on Frugal Flyer regarding TD, CIBC, and RBC product switching, so we'll get those in the show notes. But whether you get the welcome bonus or not with any of those banks, switching to a card that is at least earning the currency that you're interested in accruing versus a card that is doing nothing for you is definitely worthwhile. So worth considering.
Yep. Excellent. And then Jeff, I'm going to have our fourth host talk about the rest of the banks. And the reason why Jeff gets stuck with 3, whereas we got to specialize in 1, is because there's not a lot going on with the last 3. But Jeff, please enlighten us.
Yeah, no, there's not a lot going on. So BMO, I'll cover BMO and Scotia first, and then I'll touch on Amex later because Amex is a bit unique. So for BMO and Scotia, you can product change, you can upgrade, you can downgrade, you can change between families, you can change between networks. For example, with Scotia, you can go from an Amex to a Visa, no problem. The only issue is you're not going to get any sort of welcome bonuses on any product switching from either of those banks. You will get a prorated annual fee when you do this, but that's really all there is to say about the product switching with these 2 banks. I can't really think of any instances other than wanting to save on an annual fee as to why you would want a product switch with either of these banks. But if you guys have any ideas, let me know. Otherwise, I'll move on to Amex.
The only thing that I can think of with Scotia is that they do offer their no FX fee cards, right? So if you were planning on going on vacation or if you wanted to get 6 lounge passes, that could be worth it if you're changing from like a basic Scene Plus Visa card into the Scotia Passport Visa. I could see that having some value.
Okay. Yep. I agree.
I just apply for a new trade line, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, moving on to Amex. Jeff, this is probably the most unique bank.
Yeah. So Amex doesn't allow any sort of product switching whatsoever. The only way to obtain a new card is by upgrading one that you currently hold. And there will be 2 types of offers on these types of cards. One will just be a straight upgrade where I think you can just call in, or I think you have to be offered this upgrade via an upgrade portal. And this upgrade,
usually.
Yeah. This upgrade will usually come in the form of, say, spend X amount of dollars, receive X amount of points for upgrading your card. The nice thing about these cards or these upgrade offers is that even if you, say, for example, you hold a Amex Green card and you're being offered an upgrade to the Amex Gold card, if you're a previous card holder of the Amex, if you previously held the Amex Gold card, you will generally be eligible for that for the upgrade offer welcome bonus once again. So this is a nice way to kind of get 2 welcome bonuses on the same card because, as I'm sure we've discussed on previous episodes, Amex does limit you to 1 welcome bonus per lifetime per card.
Yes, and that's an excellent segue into step 3 of how to become a points hero, how to evaluate a welcome bonus. And just to recap for everybody listening, we've now explained to you which types of points you want to be accruing. We've also talked about how you can get some low-hanging fruit with product switching. And now you want to learn how to evaluate a welcome bonus because there's quite a few rules within the Canadian market. And let's talk about the first of those, which Jeff just mentioned, the American Express lifetime language. What is this and what does it mean? Kirin, I'd like you to jump in here.
Yes. So back in the Wild West days, before the big cough sent us all indoors, the wonderful issuer known as American Express was famous for being very generous with handing out welcome bonuses like it was Christmas / Halloween all rolled into one. People routinely would do stuff like get 7, I don't know, maybe Amex Golds, twice a year, get the bonus and then close them. Those days are long gone. They killed that. People got banned for life, or at least for a long time for doing that. Now they rather strictly enforce once in a lifetime bonuses per card. So try to make sure that you sign up during an all-time high. There has been some chatter that there are potentially limited use promotional links or waiting after closing a card 24 to 36 months and then that might reset it. I don't know if those are true. I also wouldn't necessarily risk it because right now Amex has seriously tightened up its credit underwriting requirements. So they're not giving out credit cards nearly as easily as they used to when I was getting into the game. So I think that your best bet for getting a really good American Express bonus is going to be signing up during an all-time high.
Yes. Now, to evaluate a welcome bonus, our colleague Quinton, who's not on the show today, wrote an entire article about how to choose a credit card welcome offer. But the components that you want to be aware of is that you've got a first purchase bonus, which American Express doesn't do a lot of, but oftentimes you'll see with RBC sometimes gives you the whole bonus on the first purchase. You're also going to have a minimum spending requirement, which Amex always does. So you're going to have to spend a certain amount of money within a certain amount of time. We talked about that a little bit in the CIBC upgrade offers. And then you also have to be aware of how many annual fees you have to pay to get the whole bonus. And this is a relatively new thing that we're seeing. So within the Canadian landscape, something called month 14 offers, which is the bane of our existence. Basically, you have to hold the card for at least 14 months and then spend some money in that 14th month to get the full welcome bonus. And they usually leave the biggest chunk of points into that 14th month. So these are all things that you have to be aware of as you're evaluating a credit card bonus and which one you want to sign up for. And this kind of ties into product switching too, because Aeroplan has tightened up their regulations in the last little while, where they're only awarding one credit card bonus, one bonus per credit card type. Josh, what are the 5 types of Aeroplan credit cards, and how can we decide which one to sign up for when?
Yeah, so the 5 tiers of cards are the basic cards, core cards, premium cards, small business, and premium small business cards. An example of the basic card would be the CIBC Aeroplan card.
Yep.
A core card would be the TD Aeroplan Visa Infinite card. A premium card would be the American Express Aeroplan Reserve credit card. Small business, these are issued by CIBC and TD. They're just called the, for example, CIBC Aeroplan Business Card. And the premium small business cards are only issued by American Express, and they are known as the American Express Aeroplan Reserve Small Business Cards.
That's right. So you can get a bonus on each level of those. So it's not as bad as some people make it out to be. But the small business cards from TD and CIBC are pretty difficult to get. I don't have any of those personally. Does anybody else on the show today own those cards?
I did at one time, way back in the day when they were offered on for first year free. But I closed this card several years ago, and I've never reopened them because they stopped doing those offers.
Yep. Fair enough. And then we already talked a little bit about the MX Canada lifetime language. And then we've also got the bonus that is the RBC Avion, which is quite often at 55,000 points. And how that offer is structured is you've got a first purchase that awards 35,000 points, and then a $5,000 minimum spend where you can earn 20,000 points as long as you complete that spend within 6 months. I know that there's a few different approaches to this, and some people like to spend that extra $5,000 and earn those 20,000 Avion points, but there's also another route where you could earn just the 35,000 points and then maybe decide that you're going to product switch to something else about 6 months after earning that. Does anybody have any opinions on how they like to go about that promotion?
I generally don't pursue the extra 5 spend for the 20K unless I have a large spend that can put a decent chunk into that 5K spend. I'm not going to do it in bits and pieces generally. So that's kind of how I approach it.
Yeah, because Josh kind of brought up that if you're switching to a card family that isn't the Avion, you're going to get some sort of bonus. So if you sign up for a brand new RBC Avion Infinite or Platinum with the 55K offer, you don't necessarily need to chase that extra 20K, because let's say you decide that you want to earn some British Airways Avios, you could switch into that card and you'll probably get some sum of Avios that's going to be close to 20,000 points. Josh, would you agree with that strategy?
Yeah, I love it. Keep it simple.
Amazing. So that's the parts of a welcome bonus, how you want to evaluate it, and maybe a different strategy on that very common 55,000 point offer. We're now going to talk about trip planning. So you've now understand the two types of points. You've done some easy product switching to get some of those good types of points that we talked about. And you've understood the types of bonuses that you want to be chasing, but you need to know how many points you need to get to your destination. So that is where step 4 comes in, planning your trip backwards. So the first thing is, what is your destination and how can you get there? What are some of the tools that you use, Kirin, to figure out how many points you need to take that vacation that you're planning?
Yes, this is one of those places where using third-party tools such as seats.aero or award tool can be very useful for finding specifically award seats that are available, because I don't like paying dynamic prices on flights. I like paying fixed redemption costs, or if I do have to pay dynamic, I want it to be as minimal as possible. So what I'll do is I'll look where I'm going, and then I'll build the itinerary backwards. So I know I want to be in that place, coming back to my hometown of Edmonton at this time next year. How do I do that? What am I going to need to do it?
There's one tool that we didn't mention in that little blurb called Flight Connections. And Flight Connections is something that I use all the time. It's a great way to see how to get from your home airport to the airport that you're trying to get to. So for example, if you live in Winnipeg and you want to get to Paris, there's obviously no direct flights from there. However, you probably have to connect through Toronto or Montreal. So looking at those options, you can see what airlines fly there. And then within an alliance, you can choose, okay, so if I want to fly Air Canada, what miles can I use? For most Canadians, it's going to be Aeroplan points, but there could be another option. Like, for example, Josh, I know that you are going to Bora Bora. How did you plan that trip?
Yeah, so I like to start with Flight Connections just to see how it's even possible to get there and who flies there. So I did find out that Air Tahiti Nui flies out of LAX, which is a great option. Air France also does the same. And so I've had some American Airlines points knowing that they are a partner within that program. So I was able to work backwards and determine how many points I needed for 2 people to fly. And then simply it was just a matter of finding the space and getting it booked. So starting with Flight Connections is usually the best option because it kind of gives you the high level overview of what the heck you should actually be looking for and what carriers and what days they fly on if they don't fly daily.
Yep. No, that's a really good point. And especially that last part where if you're going to some place that's a little bit more remote and you're searching for award availability and you're finding nothing, it could be that the airline just doesn't fly there that day. So Flight Connections is a great opportunity to get that information so you're searching on the right day. I also have an example where I used Aeroplan points to stop in Germany for Oktoberfest, and then I carried on to the Maldives. This is obviously not something that's going to show up when you're using the Aeroplan search engine. So what I ended up doing is searching for those flights individually. But before that, I used Flight Connections to see who flies where I want to go. And then to know how many points I needed, I used a tool called Great Circle Mapper that we just published an article on. It'll tell you the distance of your whole itinerary so that you can then cross-reference that with the Aeroplan award chart. And I could plan out that I needed X number of points, including my 5,000 point stopover, to complete this very complex itinerary. So those are all some tools that we can use so you can understand how many points your trip is going to cost. And then you can start to, like we said, plan your trip backwards so you can then sign up for the right cards. Now, Kirin, you brought up the excellent point that some redemptions are harder than others. What did you want to talk about here?
So I wanted to quickly say that unfortunately we exist in a open market and there's a huge amount of demand for certain destinations or for certain products. Back in the day, Emirates First Class was super cool on the gram. That was sort of undervalued. People were able to book it on points in a variety of easy ways. Well, guess what? That's not as easy anymore. So now it's a lot harder to get that aspirational product. Right now, what I can think of as being the most obvious example would be that East Asia as a whole is quite difficult to get to on points, but it's particularly and pronouncedly difficult to get to specifically on Aeroplan. It's not that it's impossible, it's just that it can charge quite a bit. Was it Andy or was it Quentin who had great luck getting multiple 45,000 point flights? I think it was Andy.
That was Andy. Yeah, he talked about it in the last episode. 45,000 points one way from British Columbia.
I would just say that for the purposes of the show, just be aware that as you progress in your miles and points journey, not everything's going to be super easy. There's a lot of aspirational journeys, and to get some of the really, really cool things, you might have to learn another system or another set of points. But if you just follow the principle of transferring just in time and building your itinerary backwards and just knowing very well what you want to fly and why you want to fly it, you should be able to find some excellent products that fit the points that you're able to achieve.
Yes, no, absolutely. Great reminders, Kirin, that certain regions are going to be easier than others. I think that Asia in particular has a lot smaller or a lot fewer big airports, which make it difficult to get to. Whereas Europe, we've got so many hubs that are easy to connect to from North America. And that is one of the biggest differences on why there's a lot more award flights in business class to Europe than there are in Asia right now. And the last thing about planning your itinerary and planning your trip backwards is a good use of fixed points. Josh, what can you tell us about using fixed points to cover activities that you want to do when you're at your trip?
Yeah, so we touched on these way back when in step 1, and we said, they're not as great value as those flexible, and they're not, but they fill a niche, and this is why you shouldn't ignore TD rewards. You shouldn't ignore Scotia Bank Scene Plus. You shouldn't ignore BMO rewards. They do still have a very important point within the miles and point space in Canada. So I think we've all had some unique redemptions for it. So myself, as well as Daniel, we've both used Scene Plus rewards for Disneyland tickets. Disney tickets are hella expensive. Let's just call it what it is. And once you start adding on Genie Plus and all of that stuff, it adds up very quickly. And obviously it's billed in USD as well, which sucks. So Scene Plus are an excellent tool for wiping that charge away, or at least partial. I've been to the Maldives a few times now, and typically the seaplane is either charged by the hotel or charged separately. If it's charged separately, I've put it on a Scotiabank card that has Scene Plus points and then applied points towards that as a travel charge and wiped out a large cost of the 1,000 USD seaplane that you pay to get to and from the resort. So few things like that where it's not traditional redemptions like flights and hotels, but obviously can cut the cost of the trip greatly.
Yeah, and that stuff is easy to plan backwards because the math is super simple. Those points are either worth 1 cent or half a cent each. So if you know that you want to cover $1,000 for your Disney tickets, you need 200,000 TD rewards points. Super easy to plan for that backwards. And then moving out of step 4, now that you know how to plan your trip backwards and the tools to use for that, we finally now get to applying for new cards. And the reason why we've waited this long is because you don't want to just apply for cards willy-nilly. You want to make sure you have a plan for those points. So, Jeff, why don't you wrap us up here with step 5 and talk about how we've got to this point? Like, what are the steps that we've been through, and how do you then decide which cards to apply for?
So now that we've reached step 5, you may want to look at applying for some new cards. And what I might look towards here are cards that are going to maybe offer you some benefits while you're traveling. For example, say you want to get some lounge access on your next trip. You might look at a card that has some lounge access. Or say you want to have some free check bags. You may look at a co-branded airline credit card that offers free check bags as a benefit. There are many other, and most of these co-branded cards offer these types of benefits. It's really going to depend on what you're looking for in your travel. You're generally going to want to take advantage of referral links. If you're playing in 2-player mode, that is, you and your partner will refer each other. That's a good way to generate bonus points easily. And I think that's kind of where I would start.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic way to put it, Jeff. So we've understood the points of the type of points that we're trying to collect. We've optimized with some product switching. You've evaluated the welcome bonuses that you want to get, but then most importantly, you've also planned your trip in reverse. So you know how many points you need. So applying for cards becomes easy. You can say that you need X, Y, and Z because that'll get you the points that you need for your trip. And then step 6, this is kind of an adjacent one here. For step 6, you want to consider applying to a few cards sooner rather than later, regardless of your upcoming trips. Kirin, what are some cards that you might recommend to sign up for sooner, even if they're not in your immediate travel plans?
Yeah, so just some of the useful cards to have. For example, a great daily driver for most regular Canadians is going to be the American Express Cobalt card, because that gets 5x on a variety of daily expenses, such as groceries and dining out, which a lot of us do quite a bit. If you wanted to, for example, get Bonvoy and its lovely color scheme of various repute, you could go for the Bonvoy cards, so you can start paying the annual fees and getting the 35,000 point free night credits as rapidly as possible. And it's going to get you those extra elite qualifying nights, perhaps towards your lifetime status goals.
Yeah, no, those are both two great ones.
One that I'm super partial to, that I love, is the Scotia Passport Visa Infinite, because you can avoid FX fees and you can get 6 lounge passes. I've also heard of people being able to add authorized user cards that also have 6 lounge passes for no additional fee, which can be quite lovely. And it also has a Frugal Flyer Funds offer on this card right now, along with its new offer for Q1 of 2025.
Yeah, I agree. The Scotiabank Passport is a stellar card. Highly recommended as a good general travel card for most people, and one that I recommend even the most casual of travelers.
The only other one in the Canadian market I can think of, and this is a niche one, you should only do it if you want to go on Flying Blue. For example, by taking Air France or KLM to Europe, or out of Vancouver taking China Airways to Taiwan, then you could take a look at the Brim Flying Blue card, because this is one of the only cards in Canada that's going to give you a $1 per 1 Flying Blue or 2 Flying Blue per dollar spent on dining, whereas American Express will only give you, $1 per 0.75. So that's really unique for Canada. And aside from that, if you really want to one day turbocharge your earning, these can all be great ways to get those cards that you need for the points to get on your next trip. But if you want to turbocharge your earning and take it to the next level, definitely check out frugalflyer.ca. Take a look at our extensive guides on how to get US credit cards for Canadians. Those will be the ones that will act like rocket fuel. If you think you're going fast now and it's going to feel great, you're going to feel like you're an F1 driver once you start getting to the US game.
Yep. It wouldn't be an episode of Miles Ahead if we didn't mention something about US credit cards, to say the least, because the value is great. One card that wasn't mentioned, and I know it's high up on Jeff's list. Jeff, would you recommend starting with RBC early on?
Yes, definitely. I would. You can pretty much start immediately, just because of, I guess we'll call them RBC's fairly lax enforcement of welcome bonuses.
There is no IT in RBC.
You can get this card quite often, and there's no reason not to start as soon as possible. And even if you have one, you can just get another.
Yep. Yeah, very rare that they'll claw back the welcome bonus on that. And then the last thing I want to mention here about cards to apply for sooner, I agree with Kirin that the Flying Blue card is niche. However, with Flying Blue being a 0.75 to 1 point from MX Membership Rewards as a transfer partner, if you get a 60,000 point bonus, which has existed before, you're essentially getting 80,000 membership rewards points if you plan to transfer those to Flying Blue. And if there was an 80,000 membership reward point sign-up bonus, I think we would all recommend it. So that's the last thing we have to wrap up our Learning to Get Miles Ahead, a roadmap from zero to point hero. And you know all the 6 steps now. And again, you can jump back in those timestamps if you want to go back and listen to one particular step. This is moving on to our final segment, the question of the month. And this question of the month, I have a question. My question for the group is, what happened with the Aeroplan Visa Infinite Privilege Card terms and conditions regarding the Maple Leaf Lounge guest access that we talked about in the last episode?
Yeah, so I looked into this, and it's interesting because we're seeing a bit of conflicting information for right now. So on the CIBC website, they've updated that additional guest benefit to Maple Leaf Lounges to be until December 31st, 2025. So essentially extended a year. As of recording in early January, TD still shows December 31st, 2024. I think CIBC is a good indicator of what will happen with the TD card would be my guess. They tend to move quite in step with one another. So I think that that's a safe assumption. But until I see it, physically written in the TNCs, I won't be holding my breath. But it looks to be extended another year, which is great because it's a stellar benefit on those cards, especially if you're someone who doesn't have lounge access with any other credit card.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think this is just TD being TD. They've got all sorts of crazy stuff that they do as an issuer, and this is no surprise, to me at least. And then the second question that we've actually got questions of the month rather than just one question. Maddie wrote to us, and Maddie says, "Hi there. Is there an awards search engine that covers both Star Alliance and Oneworld partners? I'm noticing that Seats.aero shows a lot of Air Canada and Star Alliance partner flights, but nothing for Oneworld. Am I doing something wrong? Or do I need to search all the Oneworld airlines individually to find flight awards? Thanks, and I'm loving your Canadian-specific content, Maddie." Does anybody have any ideas for Maddie on how she can find both Star Alliance and Oneworld availability in the same search tool?
I mean, I always think of Jeff as our Oneworld guy, I'll be honest. So,
yes, great opportunity. Jeff is too humble to plug it himself, but he has an excellent article on how to avoid taxes and fees within the Avios ecosphere. Jeff, how do you find your Oneworld awards?
So I will say that Oneworld is on Seats.aero. I mean, Seats.aero does search Alaska and it does search American Airlines. Both of those are Oneworld airlines. So you should be seeing Oneworld flights on your searches. The only thing I can think Maddie may be encountering is if she's starting her search from a Canadian airport, there's a chance that she may not be seeing some of that Oneworld availability just due to the fact that the connecting flights may not be matching up with what she's searching. That's really all I can think of. What I suggest Maddie do is go on Flight Connections and find the Oneworld hubs in the United States, because we do not have a Oneworld airline in Canada. So, for example, she could look at Dallas, the New York airports, Atlanta,
Seattle,
West Coast.
Seattle.
Yep.
Yep. Anywhere on the
SFO,
West Coast.
LAX.
Yep.
And start her search from there. And I am willing to bet that would generate some more results for Oneworld.
That's a good guess, actually. That could be it. Because, I mean, anytime I've booked Avios, I'm going to the States somewhere, typically, and getting, went to Japan a few months ago and had to go to San Francisco to start my Oneworld journey on Japan Airlines. So,
yep. Yeah, it's unfortunate Canada doesn't have any Oneworld Alliance partners. Actually, we only really have a Star Alliance partner in Air Canada, and WestJet is kind of a pseudo SkyTeam partner, but not really.
You can fly. You can fly British Airways from here. That's not a partner, I guess.
I guess there's no Canadian-based airlines that are part of Oneworld, so there's a lot fewer.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah,
that makes sense. Because I would say Qatar is the same, but I get that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
yeah. No, we don't have any based airlines here. So, Maddie, I guess my 2 cents would be for you that award search tools are fantastic, and we're seeing them pop up to give you an idea of how you can get to your destination. But there's nothing like searching on an airline's website and doing your own award searches. I still, if I'm looking for a Oneworld award, will go on Cathay Pacific, we'll go on British Airways, and we'll go on American Airlines. And unfortunately, I'll search painstakingly through each one. And that's kind of what it takes to be a true points hero. And I mean, we do this as a side hustle. So for us, it's something that we do a lot. For the average consumer, you might not want to do that, but I personally still search each website individually.
Yeah, it never hurts, right? Seats.aero, great tool to get you going, but sometimes just go into the actual frequent flyer program site. Great idea, just as much.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Miles Ahead. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. If you have any questions about the episode or anything we talked about, be sure to leave a comment on the episode page on frugalflyer.ca. And if you have a question you want us to answer on air, you can submit it on frugalflyer.ca/podcast. Bye, everybody.